About 3 years ago, my sister, who is 28 years old, and I noticed my mom, who is 74 years old, was having memory problems. I live a few hours away but tried to get her help. Unfortunately, she rejected help because she was in denial about it until this year. About 6 months ago, my mom came to me and finally admitted she knew something was wrong and wanted help. When she came to me, I told her that she should move closer to where I live so I could help her. I did not get back home to visit very often, but knew there would be more resources in my city than where she still lived in my old hometown. My hometown is a small rural town in Appalachia where the medical care is very poor, whereas I live in a large city with a medical university and good healthcare options. My mom was hesitant at first about the change, but ultimately found a place to live. When she agreed to buy it, she had one condition. She wanted to host Thanksgiving at her new house, and I readily agreed. I had always usually hosted it at one of my houses, and some of my siblings, there are several of us, always come. I like hosting, and we always have a great time. However, if this is how my mom agrees to accept help, I'm happy to let her host. The closing moves along, and my siblings and I go to our hometown to move her. We arrive for moving day and discover her house is disgusting. We had always known she was a bit of a hoarder, but it was beyond any of our worst nightmares. We were in over our heads, but all took a little additional time off work. We spent a week filling dumpsters and got what was salvageable cleaned up and packed up. I was, to be honest, scared and intimidated by what I had signed up for. My mom and I have not always had the best relationship. Even with reduced mental capacity, she can be cruel, but still, I had promised to help, so I continued on my plan. As of today, she's been living in a house next to me for a couple of months now. My mom basically stays at my house a large percentage of the day. In the evening, I go to her house to do chores, and she stays home to sleep at her house. I have gotten her under the care of amazing doctors, and they have rapidly figured out that she has Alzheimer's. Things are changing quickly. Since we just got her formally diagnosed, we are just now eligible to get her more help, but the process has just begun. For now, my family and I help her at her house daily, but it is hard. She will not listen to our advice. She is buying junk from Wish and filling her house up again. We clean every day, but she messes it up faster. She has taken in a feral cat who uses the stove as a litter box every day, no matter how many clean litter boxes we put out. When I tell her the cat should go back outside, she cries. Today, my mom reminded me that I promised she could host Thanksgiving. My siblings do not want to eat there, and I don't blame them. No matter how much I clean, none of them trust her house since the move. Some of them know about the cat using the stove. How do I tell her I'm taking back hosting? Now for an update. I'm posting this on behalf of my mom and aunt, as they don't use Reddit but want an outside opinion. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This is bigger than Thanksgiving. You are describing someone who should not be living independently, and it's time to start talking about long-term care options. I mean, it's a good thing that she's under better medical care and things seem to be improving, but your description of better is not a description of safe to live unsupervised. You point out that you are posting for your mother and your aunt. They need to talk to your mother's physician and figure out the best way to transition her to a living situation with full-time supervision. And unfortunately, they need to understand that this is not going to be something she is going to cooperate with. Once she is settled into a permanent living situation that is safe for her throughout the progression of her diagnosis, she is likely to be happier in the long run. I'm so sorry. Comment 2. Contact your local or nearest Alzheimer's or dementia organization for useful, effective, respectful, and stress-free tactics and tips to manage a loved one with memory loss issues. Sorry you're all experiencing this. It's really hard. You need to get onto that hoarding again before it turns into an elder neglect scenario. Plus, the other legalities other Redditors mentioned. Compassionate lies, redirecting, etc. are useful. If she has tantrums and hissy fits, get inventive. Redirect and deal with it. Best of luck to you all. Now for the update. A few days after my last post, I decided to call a family meeting to talk about Thanksgiving. I invited my siblings, Sarah and Mark, to chat about it at a diner near my mom's new house. I thought it would be a good neutral spot, but honestly, I just wanted to avoid the mess at my mom's place. Like I said before, I was trying to support her, but I needed backup from my siblings on this one. So, they both showed up and looked pretty worried about the upcoming holiday. Just to give you some context, Thanksgiving is a big deal in our family. My mom always went all out, so this year was going to be different for all of us. And honestly, I was worried we'd all be stuck in the same old dysfunctional dynamic where nothing got done and we just ended up arguing. I brought up the cleanliness issues and the cat, hoping we'd all be on the same page. I started off by saying we all needed to help Mom host Thanksgiving. They both looked at me like I was crazy, so I quickly clarified that I meant help her clean up the place. I thought they'd agree, but Sarah suggested we all chip in for a cleaning service. I thought it was a great idea, but Mark disagreed. He said it would upset our mom, and that just started a whole debate. Honestly, it was like watching a ping pong match. Sarah and Mark went back and forth trying to convince each other. I tried to mediate, but I was also getting a little frustrated, to be honest. Mark kept saying we needed to respect our mom's wishes, and I get that, but we were past that point. She needed help, and we couldn't just ignore the fact that her house was a total mess. After what felt like forever, we agreed to visit our mom's house after the meeting to see the condition firsthand. We figured that once we saw the mess, we'd be more motivated to help her clean up. When we arrived, we found the house cluttered, as expected, but the feral cat was running around and it had ripped open a bunch of bags, so there was junk all over the floor. It was pretty bad. Our mom was excited to see us and started sharing her plans for Thanksgiving dinner. She was talking super fast, and I could see Mark getting anxious because the house was a disaster and our mom didn't even notice. He bluntly suggested they help clean up, but our mom got defensive. She insisted she was capable and didn't need anyone's help, and that led to this awkward conversation. Mark tried to talk to her, but she was just so stubborn. I could tell that Mark was getting really frustrated, and I was too, but I didn't want to make things worse, so I just kept quiet. Sarah tried to change the subject to Thanksgiving dinner, but it was clear that it was going to be a tough holiday season. A week later, Thanksgiving was just around the corner, and the house was still a mess. I got a text from my mom asking for a little help with planning the dinner. I knew what she meant by little help, so I called up my siblings. We agreed to go over there together and talk to her about it. When we arrived, my mom proudly showed off her Thanksgiving decorations, but the mess was worse than before. She had actually added to the mess. I pointed out that we needed to clean for guests, but my mom brushed it off and said she wanted it to be decorated for Thanksgiving. Then, the sibling group chat got a little out of control. We started discussing the increasing mess and our mom's denial, and Mark suggested canceling the Thanksgiving gathering altogether. That caused a rift in the group. Sarah was really upset, and I was too, but I knew we couldn't just ignore this. The day before Thanksgiving, I found a large pile of junk at the front door while visiting. I was curious, so I opened a box and found old family photos mixed with trash. It was really sad to see, so I decided to get help from a neighbor who had experience with hoarding situations. The neighbor agreed to come over the next day, Thanksgiving morning, to help clean. I figured we'd be in and out before our mom even noticed. On Thanksgiving morning, I arrived at my mom's house with the neighbor. My mom was initially upset to see someone else helping, but reluctantly let them in. As we cleaned, we found a collection of valuable items hidden beneath the junk. It was kind of amazing to see. We found a bunch of old coins and jewelry, and I thought we were going to end up with quite a bit of money. After several hours, the house was significantly cleaner, but my mom was not pleased. She accused us of ruining her Thanksgiving spirit and kicked everyone out. I was so upset, but I knew we had to contact a local auction house to appraise the valuable items. A week later, the auction took place, and the items sold for a surprising amount. I used the money to hire a cleaning crew to tackle the house thoroughly. I informed my mom after the fact, explaining the decision was necessary for her health. She was furious, but eventually had to accept the help. Tensions remained high, but the house was now clean, and Thanksgiving was salvageable. My siblings and I agreed to hold the dinner at a local restaurant instead to avoid more conflict. Thanksgiving dinner at the restaurant went smoothly, and my mom reluctantly attended. Things are still complicated with my family. I know I crossed a line by going behind my mom's back and hiring a cleaning crew, but it felt necessary given the circumstances. It's been tough trying to navigate this with my siblings too. Mark is still upset with me, and Sarah thinks we should have done things differently. I probably won't be posting for a while, but I'll make sure to update if anything big happens in the future. Edit. Thanksgiving dinner was a success despite the circumstances. My mom has been more agreeable since the cleaning crew helped. Mark and Sarah still have mixed feelings, but are adjusting. Am I the idiot for calling my wife heartless after she said she wouldn't have kids with me if she knew I was autistic? My wife Cora and I have been together for over 5 years and married for 3. Both Cora and I always dreamed of having a large family. We both love each other dearly, and I truly thought nothing could come between us. Now I feel like my whole world is falling apart. I have always struggled a bit with my mental health. I always struggled with socializing and keeping up in school when I was a kid. I was bullied a lot for being weird and not as smart as the other kids or my siblings. I never got therapy because my parents believed that therapy was just for women and men who were too weak to handle it on their own. I finally decided to make the jump and go see a therapist. Recently, I was officially diagnosed with autism. I had a huge mix of emotions. I was shocked, relieved, and insecure. I finally had some answers for why I felt so different growing up. But I also felt scared because I didn't want people to look at or treat me differently. Shortly after I told Cora about my diagnosis, things between us started to feel off. She was very supportive and gave me comfort, but I could tell something was wrong. She wasn't nearly as talkative. I would regularly catch her deep in thought, and she seemed to grow more distant as the days went on. The biggest change I noticed was that Cora almost completely stopped talking about babies. She went from constantly sending me baby-related content from TikTok to not even wanting to talk about the subject at all. After 2 weeks of this, I finally decided to confront her. She kept saying that she didn't want to talk about it and that she was fine. I told her she was not fine. I was starting to fear the worst, and we were going to talk about this now. After prying at her for several minutes, she finally confessed that she doesn't think we should have children anymore. My heart sank. She started talking a mile a minute and kept reassuring me that we could still adopt. She said that she grew up with a sibling who had special needs, and it made her childhood miserable. She said that she couldn't bring herself to have a child with me. Now knowing the chances of producing a child with special needs are much higher. I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was filled with pain and rage. What she said next completely pushed me over the edge. She told me, "I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I love you so much. Believe me, if I had known you were autistic, I never would have brought up having kids." I lost it. I screamed at her and said, "If I had known you were such a heartless person, I never would have married you." She just looked at me with a blank stare, and I stormed out before she could respond. I feel so broken. In that moment, it felt like all the years of abuse and ridicule were replaying back in my mind. We haven't spoken to each other for a couple of days. I feel awful for yelling, but I feel so hurt. I just don't know what to do. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Well, the first thing you can do is consider whether what she is saying is reasonable. For myself, being married to someone recently diagnosed with autism and having 2 autistic kids, I can tell you that all the burden falls on me, and I would be telling her not to have kids with you if I knew you. Yes, it sucks, but life does that sometimes. You need to reassess your life goals when you have a disability diagnosis and work out what is achievable and reasonable and what is not. Autism is inherited. You are clearly high functioning, but your kids may not be. Comment 2. It is clear that you need time to process what she said. Although you were capable of making it, this disability is a spectrum, and she is not heartless for not wanting to take care of a special needs child. Clearly, her experience is valid. I have seen many strong people fail miserably at this task. and she is not opposed to a family with you. She is open to adoption. Take a moment to think about this holistically. It is not wrong to not want a special needs child. If that is something you don't want in a partner, it might be better to end things amicably. Now for the update. 2 days after the whole fight, Cora texted me wanting to meet at our favorite pizza place. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. I had this knot in my stomach, a mix of dread and maybe a bit of hope. After thinking it over, I agreed and went. When I got there, though, she looked so tired and distant, like not herself at all. Avoided eye contact like it was a sport. The vibe was off, to say the least. She started by saying how hard things have been between us. I just nodded. Man, I tried so hard to stay calm, not blow up again. Just breathe and communicate, right? She told me she spent the last few days talking to her parents about everything that happened. Great. Just great. She said her parents had strong opinions about her not having children, and it influenced how she felt about the whole thing. I could feel my chest getting tight. Then, she suggested we take a break from talking about having kids for now and focus on our relationship. I just wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that we can't just ignore it. But I didn't. We finished our meal in silence. I felt like I was in a fog, just lost in thought, not really knowing what to say or do. Later that week, I went to a family dinner at her parents' house. Yeah, that was awkward. I sat across from her parents, and the tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The conversation kept drifting to family plans and all that stuff. Cora's mom brought up grandchildren, expecting Cora to say something. Cora just smiled, kind of forced, and didn't say anything. I wanted to crawl under the table. After dinner, Cora pulled me aside and asked me to keep quiet about our issues. She wanted us to act like everything was normal in front of her parents. I didn't like it, but what could I do? The next day, I found this article online about parenting and autism. I thought it could help us, maybe spark a discussion or something. So I shared it with Cora, hoping she'd be interested. She read it, but seemed so uninterested, like she was reading a grocery list. Changed the subject to our weekend plans. Frustrated, I suggested we attend a local community event focused on family resources. She didn't seem enthusiastic about it, but agreed to go, saying she wanted to support me. I just wanted to shake her and scream, "This is our life too!" At the event, I met this couple who had a child with special needs. They shared their story, and it was real hard to hear, but it was also kind of beautiful in a way. Later, Cora said she felt uncomfortable hearing their story. She said it scared her. Scared her? We got into this quiet argument where people around us probably heard us. She left the event early, saying she needed space. I just stood there, feeling so isolated. That night I texted her asking if we could talk openly about our future. She replied with a simple, maybe. Like, really? A maybe? The next day I thought, screw it. I decided to visit a local support group for families dealing with similar issues. I learned so much from these people. Seriously, it was a lifesaver. I felt a sense of community I didn't know I needed. A week later, my younger sister invited Cora and me to this birthday party for her son. Cora agreed to go, but the tension was still there, like a cloud hanging over us. At the party, the conversation turned to family planning, and I could feel Cora stiffening at the topic. After the party, I confronted her. I told her we needed to talk seriously about our future. She just looked at me, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. It's like we're both so tired, but we're stuck in this never-ending cycle of not talking about the big stuff. To answer a few questions, Cora's parents have no idea about our fight, and they still expect grandkids from us. Am I the idiot for walking away from my boyfriend's family after they turned my health into a punchline? I have a few chronic conditions and see 9 specialists for them all. I've never had cancer. I had a benign melanoma mole once years ago, but nothing that would be classified as cancer. I was in the hospital just before I met my boyfriend for anemia and was never able to find a reason for it. But it's not cancer. I've told my boyfriend on at least 2 occasions that I am guarded about my medical history, as people in the past, especially romantic partners, have used it to their advantage to get out of work or gain sympathy, and in return, never took care of me when I needed it. So I generally don't tell people when I'm sick or in the emergency room because of it. I met his parents for his birthday weekend. It was the first time. The night before I met them, he texted me that he told them all about me and they were excited to meet me. I thought this was really cute at first, but I got to his house in the morning and I asked what he said so I wouldn't repeat too much. And he said, well, I told them you have condition and you were in the hospital for anemia and that you had leukemia. I was taken aback and said, I never had leukemia. He kind of just went, oh, guess you'll want to clear that up with them then. So the second thing I said to his parents was clarifying that I never had cancer. I was embarrassed by it, and he made it seem like no big deal and immediately changed topics. I feel really violated that he would disclose such information without my consent, and I feel really disappointed and unheard that after 5 months of being very close, he still doesn't know what my conditions are, and moreover didn't even bother to check what leukemia is or if I had it. I feel a huge loss of trust and affection now. How would you proceed? To add, a big thank you to the few who didn't jump to the leave him solution. We had a really great talk last night and cleared everything up. He was not at all defensive. He was very apologetic, and he asked how he could improve and how he could learn more about my conditions. He admitted to having a few misunderstandings and expressed that he wants to better educate himself. It was not on purpose to hurt me at all. To those who called me out on the melanoma thing, as someone started, it was an isolated instance that was quickly taken care of, monitored and cleared. I didn't mean to suggest it was anything but benign. I was trying to convey it was never anything more than mole removal for me. To the folks who jump to breaking up while only getting a small snapshot of a one-sided story, you know you can talk about an issue you have and may be able to overcome that issue together as a team and proceed to have a happy and healthy relationship, right? It's totally okay if something is beyond your tolerance. But as someone else said, if you break up every time a problem comes up, you'll never stay with anyone. I'm going to proceed with this lovely man and see what happens. Communication is important. You never know what the other person knows or thinks, and you should never assume someone will react or act the way you would in a situation. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You know you can break up with someone you've known only 5 months when they make you feel violated, lie about you, make you fix that lie, and don't pay attention to what you say to know you don't have cancer, right? Like dating is to see if you're compatible with someone. Are you compatible with this, or is it best to move on to someone else? Dating does not mean fixing someone. Comment 2. Not the point of your post, but there is no such thing as benign melanoma. Melanoma is a cancer. There is no such thing as a benign cancer. You can have stage 0, which is contained to the epidermis, but that is still cancer. You can have an atypical mole, which is sometimes called precancerous, but that's not a melanoma. Now for the update, 1 week after the dinner with my boyfriend's parents, I got a late night call from him. He was panicked and told me he had been in an accident driving home from work. I rushed to the hospital, and when I got there, he was in the emergency room with a broken wrist. His mom was there too, looking really upset and worried about her son. She thanked me for coming, but things were still awkward from our last meeting. My boyfriend kept saying he was fine, but I could see he was in pain and had a hard time moving. While I was there, his mom started asking about my health problems again, which annoyed me. I thought we were past that. My boyfriend had a follow-up appointment with an orthopedic specialist a few days later, and I went with him just to show my support despite everything that had happened before. The doctor explained the treatment plan, and my boyfriend needed to wear a cast for several weeks. After the appointment, my boyfriend suggested we celebrate his recovery with a small gathering at his place. I thought it would be a good distraction, so I agreed to help plan it. I invited a few close friends, but then my boyfriend insisted on inviting his whole family. That surprised me a little, but I went with it. The day of the gathering, my boyfriend's parents showed up with this huge cake that I hadn't planned for at all. While everyone was mingling, my boyfriend's dad made this random comment about my health history. I was done with that topic, so I confronted him later in private and told him how uncomfortable it made me. My boyfriend overheard the conversation and seemed annoyed at me for saying something to his dad. Things got worse when his brother jokingly suggested a toast to the family's health. After that, my boyfriend's younger sister made a comment about me being too sensitive. I was just done at that point, so I stepped outside for some fresh air. My boyfriend followed me and didn't get why I was so upset. We ended up arguing about his family's comments, and he accused me of not being able to take a joke. Then, his mom pulled me aside and tried to help me understand their family dynamics. My boyfriend overheard this and got really defensive of his mom, which just made things worse between us. I left the gathering early because I felt unwelcome and frustrated. The next day, I got a message from my boyfriend asking to talk. We met at a diner, and he expressed his disappointment about me leaving the gathering early. He said his family was just trying to make light of the situation. He suggested we take a break from all the serious conversations about our relationship for a bit. A few days later, I found out he had been texting his mom about our argument. I just couldn't deal with that, so I told him I needed space to think about everything. He agreed, but seemed really annoyed, like he thought I was overreacting or something. Edit. After telling my boyfriend I needed space, I realized he hadn't respected my boundaries. He kept texting daily about minor things, which felt like him ignoring my request. It made me feel pressured to respond, even though I needed time. I'm now reassessing our relationship and considering if it's worth continuing. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.